Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for
Thank you.
that. Vanessa, let me welcome you to the program then. And well, this is related to Gaza, of course, and the Middle East, but the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office have decided that if you are not happy with government policy, then maybe that's tough.
Yeah, and I want to remind everyone, as in Charles's report, this is your country when it comes down to digital ID. But it obviously clearly doesn't come down to it being your country when it comes to any dissent against government policy. So this was a report. It's been widely reported across all mainstream media, but this is in Politico. UK officials say civil servants concerned about British support for Israel can resign. So just taking from the article, 300 staff from the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, wrote to David Lammy saying the UK had contributed to the erosion of global norms by failing to take action against Israel. And they went on to point out, and this is very similar to what happened at the BBC, they also noted with concern efforts to screen out questions about Gaza in all staff meeting sessions and urged ministers to publish legal advice and potentially suspend arms sales. I mean, of course, I would argue arms sales have been claimed to have already been suspended, but we know perfectly well that they haven't. Only specific parts have been nominally suspended. So who responded to this? First of all, Ollie Robbins, who's the UK Foreign Office Permanent Undersecretary, so advisor to the government. If your disagreement with any aspect of government policy or action is profound, your ultimate recourse is to resign from the civil service. This is an honourable course. So absolutely no, concept of discussion or taking people's points on board. 300 is a relatively high number of civil servants who've come forward. Quick look at who Ollie Robbins is. He was managing director of Goldman Sachs 2019 to 2023, so for 5 years. He led international negotiations on G8, the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, Brexit, and he advised 4 prime ministers, including during the financial crash of 2008. And just very quickly to look at Goldman Sachs's role in supporting Israel since October the 7th. This is an investigation by BankTrack. 7 underwriters of war bonds instrumental in enabling Israel's assault on Gaza. New research finds. This is very recently published. And let's have a look at who heads that list. Of course, guess what? Goldman Sachs, by far the largest institution listed, having underwritten more than $7 billion in Israeli war bonds since October the 7th. But it also includes the Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, Barclays, and JP Morgan Chase. And I think Citi is up on that list also. And then Nick Dyer, who was the other second permanent undersecretary to go back at the civil servants. And this is taken from the article. They warned civil servants that while there was no problem having criticisms of government policy, their job was to deliver the policies of the government of the day wholeheartedly. And for me, I don't know how you feel, but there's a sort of subliminal threat in that statement that if they don't wholeheartedly support government policy, of course they can resign or they can be pushed out. Nick Dyer and Ollie Robbins have been supporting wholeheartedly UK efforts to go to war with Russia and Ukraine. This was from April the 17th on X. At Nick Dyer's account. Last week, I visited Kiev to reaffirm the UK's unwavering commitment to Ukraine, speak to our partners inside and outside government, and spend time with staff at UK and Ukraine. Very similar wording, of course, to the statements they make about their unequivocal support for Israel. And we did recently do an interview at UK Column with Ben Rubin and Dr. David Miller on the connections between Ukraine and Israel. So I would recommend that people take a look at that. And of course, this goes back to the over 100 BBC staff accused the network of pro-Israel bias in their Gaza coverage. And of course, we can't really divorce the BBC from government itself. And so it's interesting that there is mutiny both within the BBC and within the government itself. itself. And then this is basically from the Middle East, or the Minister for the Middle East. Yesterday, Israel and the occupied territories Minister for the Middle East statement to Parliament on UK sanctions on Israeli government ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who of course are considered to be the furthest right extremist members of Netanyahu's government, who have been, let's say, at least encouraging the reformation of the former Israeli terrorist factions, Ergun and Stern, under the control of Ben-Gvir in the occupied territories. Ben-Gvir has effectively been arming the extremist settler factions, and obviously they've been leading consistent attacks against Palestinian farms and property. And of course, we know that the annexation of the West Bank is continuing in line with the continuing genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. So what did Hamish Falconer have to say? It's a very long statement. People can go and read it themselves, but I just took a couple of points. So he's saying this is why we've pledged 101 million to the Palestinian people this year. Quite who those Palestinian people are, he doesn't clarify. Why we are working to strengthen and reform the Palestinian Authority. Of course, the Palestinian Authority, under the leadership of Mahmoud Abbas, is known to be nothing more than a stooge working on behalf of the Zionist regime and actually punishing their own Palestinian resistance against the consistent Zionist ethnic cleansing in all areas of Palestine. And he says that we are clear that Hamas must release hostages. Of course, again, no mention of the 9,000 plus hostages taken by Israel since October the 7th and existing prisoners in Zionist jails that are being raped and tortured and physically abused on an hourly basis. Many of them, of course, dying in imprisonment from starvation and torture. So he's clear that Hamas must release hostages, but no mention of the Zionist-held hostages, and that Hamas must have no role whatsoever in Palestinian governance. Now, this is connected to my next report on what's happening in Gaza, but it's clear that the British government is defending the United Kingdom of Israel over and above British citizens, in my opinion.
Vanessa, let me ask you a quick question. If you were working for the British Civil Service and you felt that you were being asked to do things which were counter to your personal morality, would you resign?
Well, no. I would kick up a fuss, which I guess these 300 civil servants have attempted to do, and effectively are not being listened to. And the fact that in staff meetings, Gaza is not even being allowed to be brought up. I mean, I think that there should be, and there is scope under legislation, I'm guessing, for the civil servants to take action against the government for not heeding their concerns over British government policy.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It is an astonishing line to take. I think the Foreign Office to double down on this is inexcusable, really, especially at the same time as even the head of the ICRC in the region is describing the flagrant abuses of international humanitarian law and the complete disregard for the Geneva Convention. So for the Foreign Office to take this line seems entirely tone deaf, for want of a better phrase. I mean, yes, I think it's much more to talk about, but it seems a disgraceful way to treat people with entirely legitimate and legitimised concerns.
Absolutely. Okay. If you like what the UK Column does, you would like to support us, the place to go is support.ukcolumn.org. There are options there to help us out, including making a donation, joining as a member. And if you do join as a member, of course, you get access to members-only content, such as UK Column News Extra, which immediately follows this programme. You could support us by picking something up at the UK Column shop. Or if you want to buy something from clive2carl.com, if you use the link on this page, we do get a small commission for everything that you buy, although it doesn't cost you any more. And I just want to say once again, a massive thank you to everybody that does support us in this way. And also a thank you to anybody that does support us by sharing our material, because of course, although share links are provided on the pages that are on the UK Column website, it is increasingly difficult for us to get content shared on social media, and your help is absolutely needed. Now, tonight at 7 p.m, Jerm will be speaking to Zoe Harcom and this is everything they tell you about diet is wrong. Fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Just flies in the face of all the conventional wisdom, particularly that's pumped out by the government, all the nonsense such as 5 a day and don't eat meat, and she will set the record straight. So really worth listening to.
Okay, 7 p.m. tonight in the usual places, including ukcolumn.org/live. And then tomorrow at 1 p.m., also in the usual places, Brian is speaking to Vicky Ash. Now, this interview is with a survivor of abuse, so please be aware that watching this could be triggering. However, it is an overwhelmingly positive interview, so do join Brian at 1 p.m. for that. The interview that went out at 1 yesterday with Gemma Cooper, on reflections on a day with mothers separated from their children. That is up on the UK Column website as an on-demand version. If you want to have a look at that, please do. And Charles, the next on-location event date for everybody's diary, Saturday the 18th of October.
Yeah, we'll be there before we know it, and we are very excited about it with good reason, having had an event in Bristol and indeed Cheltenham this year, and these in-person events absolutely are the way to go. But I think mainly for now, it's important to say that we've got a theme which is going to be health, and therefore, of course, considering what Zoe Harcombe has to say is really pertinent. But it'll be a terrific gathering, this time in the north of England, so hopefully an accessible place being York for people perhaps even from north of the border. And we're delighted to say that the venue's fantastic. It'll take cash. There'll be a chance for a social in the evening. And indeed, there'll be contributions from UK Column presenters throughout the day. So really, really exciting event on the horizon. And there'll be more details and the detail with regard to tickets in due course.
And finally, a announcement about tonight, June the 11th, 7:15 for 7:30, Healing's Future. This is talking about Havant Borough Council leader, Councillor Phil Mundy. He'll be speaking. Havant's Chief Planning Officer and your Havant Borough Councillors and so on. Do head along to that if you want to get involved in local politics in that part of the world. Now, Sandy, let me welcome you back to the programme. And indeed, Vanessa, let's come back to you. Welcome back. And let's talk about the latest from Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, well, shock horror. There are reports that Israel, or rather Netanyahu's regime, is funding ISIS in Gaza to attempt to overthrow Hamas, or to at least muddy the water. Of course, Israel was also admitted to having funded and armed the various groups fighting to overthrow the Syrian government, and those included ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So here it is, Avigdor Lieberman accuses Netanyahu of arming ISIS-linked militias in Gaza. The PM's office offers no denial. And then let's see exactly what Lieberman said on a Cannes TV interview. I put that in. The Zionist regime was, in quotes, transferring weapons to a group of thugs and criminals who identify with ISIS on the orders of the Prime Minister. So let's have a look at who this group is very quickly. Abu Yasser Shabab is the leader. A resident of Rafah in southern Gaza declared formation of a new armed force, which identifies very much with ISIS ideology, operating under the Palestinian legitimacy, allegedly, that received the blessing of the Palestinian Authority leadership. So let's go back to the fact that the British government has been recently working hard to develop collaboration with the Palestinian Authority. So is the British government effectively, by default, also supporting ISIS, that is collaborating with the PA in Gaza? A question that should be raised potentially with the British government itself. Netanyahu has come back and actually confirmed that Israel is arming effectively ISIS. He determines them to be clans in Gaza to fight Hamas after Lieberman's allegations. So effectively, they have admitted it. And what did his office actually say in this article in the Jerusalem Post? These statements must be a glaring red line for anyone. So that, in other words, they're attacking Lieberman, outing them. For anyone who cares about the security of the state. They harm, first and foremost, our soldiers and put hostages at risk. Israel's interest is to protect soldiers by using whatever means possible. So a very sort of convoluted statement there put out by Netanyahu to try and defend the fact that he is, while claiming to be fighting terrorists in Gaza, he's actually now funding and arming terrorists in Gaza to fight terrorists in Gaza. I mean, you can't sort of make this stuff up. And recently there was a video circulating on social media in the last 2 days, which show the ISIS factions opening fire on the aid queues, which of course is a lure, it's a trap to bring out the young men from the remaining so-called safe zones in Gaza that of course are not safe zones at all. They're being routinely bombed, and then basically to open fire on them. So the IDF now doesn't have to do it. It can rely now on ISIS, as it did in Syria, to run its war against the resistance in Gaza. So let's just have a look at the video.
هاي ولاد شعبنا، هاي بطاق قاعد، ولاد شعبنا هاي من لحم ودم، هذا من لحم ودم اجا. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. هاي هذا من شعب الزنب، هذا الزنب يا ولاد الحرام، هذول بدهم الزنب وشردوا، كلهم شردوا، كلهم شردوا. هايهم حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
يا شباب، يا شباب،
حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. الزنب هذا الزنب ابن بلدي، هذا الزنب.
So it's not enough that they're deliberately starving Gazans while bombing them, burning them alive, using weaponized aid against them, and now bringing in terrorist factions that, you know, the West is condemning in Syria, allegedly, while of course they are also funding and arming them, to carry out strikes against young men that are going to gather aid for their families out of desperation. I mean, I don't know, this entire situation just seems to descend into greater and greater sadism and humiliation of the Palestinian people.
And silence from the anybody that's helping to promote the Israeli cause, Vanessa, on the issue of the working with yet another extremist faction.
Yeah, I mean, absolute silence. Nothing from the West. It's business as normal, apparently, and civil servants are not allowed to object.
Yes, incredible. Charles, let's move over to you then, and